In shadowed corners of literature lie the words of H.P. Lovecraft, chronicler of things best left buried. From ancient tomes and crumbling journals, his tales speak of cosmic dread, inhuman gods, and the frailty of the human mind. Welcome to AI Lovecraft. Today, we bring you the life of H.P. Lovecraft. If you enjoy the following story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what you think. Now let's get into today's story. H.P. Lovecraft, master of cosmic horror. In the twilight of Providence, Rhode Island, a solitary dreamer peered into the cosmic abyss and returned to share its horrors. That dreamer was Howard Phillips Lovecraft, a writer born in 1890, whose life was as strange and sorrowful as the tales he penned. Lovecraft would become a master of macabre fiction, pioneering the cosmic horror genre, stories of unspeakable beings and vast, indifferent universes that care nothing for human sanity. His work exudes a dark, enigmatic aura, and behind it lay a man grappling with personal demons, fleeting triumphs, and haunting struggles. This is the dramatic story of H.P. Lovecraft, a life steeped in shadow and imagination, and a legacy that looms large over horror literature. Lovecraft was born on August 20th, 1890, into an affluent family in Providence, but darkness soon clouded his childhood. When he was just 3, his father, Winfield Scott Lovecraft, suffered a psychological breakdown, likely due to syphilis, and was committed to an asylum, dying 5 years later. Young Howard was left in the care of his mother, Sarah Susie Lovecraft, and his maternal grandfather, Whipple Van Buren Phillips. Whipple indulged Lovecraft's imagination with volumes of literature and nightly ghost stories, tales that thrilled the boy and terrified him in equal measure. It's said the grandfather's grim stories sparked intense childhood night terrors, sending Lovecraft running to his mother's room, convinced that monsters lurked in the shadows around him. These early brushes with phantom horrors would later germinate into the otherworldly nightmares of his fiction. Despite his precocious intellect and passion for learning, Lovecraft's youth was troubled by constant illness and anxiety. He was a sickly, sensitive child, fascinated by science, especially astronomy and chemistry, yet too frail to attend school consistently. After his beloved grandfather died in 1904, the family's fortunes collapsed. Lovecraft and his mother were forced to leave their grand home and move into a modest dwelling, an upheaval that plunged him into a deep depression. He enrolled in high school but suffered what he called nervous breakdowns that kept him out of classes for long stretches, ultimately preventing him from graduating. By his late teens, Lovecraft was essentially a recluse, living in near seclusion with his mother. To cope, he turned inward to his vivid imagination, reading voraciously, writing poetry and amateur fiction, and gazing at the stars through a telescope. In 1912, he published his first work, a poem in the local newspaper, and soon he found refuge in the world of amateur journalism and writing. The stage was set for the emergence of a unique new voice in horror, even as the young author's personal life grew ever more isolated. Lovecraft's entry into professional writing came in an unlikely way, through a quarrel via letters. In 1913, annoyed by the poor quality of stories in a pulp magazine, he penned a scathing letter to the editor. This bold critique caught the attention of the United Amateur Press Association, drawing Lovecraft into a community of writers and pulp fiction publishers. By the 1920s, Lovecraft's weird tales were appearing in magazines like Weird Tales, and he became the nucleus of a circle of like-minded authors, later dubbed the Lovecraft Circle. These peers, including Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and others, corresponded with Lovecraft, shared ideas, and even incorporated elements of his growing mythology into their own stories. In 1924, Lovecraft married Sonia Green, a Russian Jewish immigrant and fellow writer, and moved to New York City in hopes of new opportunity. But the marriage was fraught with difficulties, financial and personal, and the bustling metropolis only aggravated Lovecraft's feelings of alienation. He struggled to find steady work, and the couple separated after 2 years. Lovecraft, disillusioned and nearly penniless, retreated back to Providence in 1926, seeking the familiar comfort of his old hometown. Reinvigorated by his return home, Lovecraft entered his most productive period in the late 1920s and early 1930s. In a burst of creativity, he penned many of his master works, eerie, erudite tales that would later define cosmic horror. During this time, he wrote The Call of Cthulhu, the nightmarish story of an ancient alien god stirring beneath the sea, the Dunwich Horror, about a diabolical creature spawned in rural Massachusetts, At the Mountains of Madness, an Antarctic expedition's encounter with primordial horrors, The Shadow over Innsmouth, a seaside town's unspeakable secret, and others. These stories were often published in pulp magazines, usually weird tales, for meager pay and little acclaim. Yet collectively, they were stitching together an elaborate, original mythology, later known as the Cthulhu Mythos, an interconnected legendarium of ancient gods and forbidden lore. In Lovecraft's cosmos, ordinary New Englanders would stumble upon ageless terrors from beyond the stars, and in doing so reveal a terrifying truth, humanity's utter insignificance in the face of cosmic forces. Lovecraft's brand of horror was something new, something truly unsettling. He abandoned the Gothic castles and European vampires of old, and instead offered a universe of overwhelming dread. In his philosophy of cosmic horror, the villains are not just monsters that can be vanquished by courage or wit, but unfathomable beings, so ancient and powerful that they regard humanity as insignificant specks if they notice us at all. As one literary expert describes, Lovecraft introduced the frightening concept that the cosmos is filled with beings and forces so beyond us they aren't even aware of our existence as they terrify, destroy, and annihilate us. In The Call of Cthulhu, for example, the titular entity is a titan lurking beneath the ocean, only glimpsed in dreams and madness, not evil in a traditional sense, but simply beyond human comprehension or control. This notion that unspeakable horrors lie just beyond the veil of reality became Lovecraft's signature. His writing style, laden with archaic prose and mounting atmosphere, pulled readers slowly into a chasm of fear of the unknown. In essence, Lovecraft created the cosmic horror genre, forever changing the landscape of horror literature. Even as Lovecraft's fictional horrors flourished on paper, he was stalked by very real demons in life. One was lifelong poverty and failure. Despite his prolific output, Lovecraft made only a pittance from his stories, often earning less than $100 for tales that are now considered classics. He took odd jobs as a ghostwriter and editor to scrape by, and relied on the charity of friends and the remnants of his family's decayed wealth. By the mid-1930s, his financial situation was dire. He could barely afford heat or food, subsisting on cold beans and weakening with malnutrition. Whereas contemporaries like Edgar Allan Poe, whom Lovecraft admired, had achieved some fame in their lifetimes, Lovecraft languished in relative obscurity. He sometimes sabotaged his own chances at success, declining opportunities that might have commercialized his work, perhaps out of pride or adherence to his peculiar vision. As one biographer put it, Lovecraft often seemed to sabotage any possibility of making a living from writing. The result was a life on the margins, a gentlemanly figure in a threadbare suit, haunting the Providence library by day and filling countless notebooks with fiction and letters by night, all the while sinking into isolation and despair. Another demon was Lovecraft's own troubling psyche. He was undeniably a product of his time's prejudices, but even by those standards, his views were extreme. Lovecraft harbored a profound xenophobia and racism, a fear and distrust of anyone he saw as other, that infused some of his personal letters and early writings. He spoke of immigrants and people of different races with disdain and horror, and this bigotry sometimes bled through in his stories like The Horror at Red Hook and The Shadow over Innsmouth. His hatred was not a secret, Even Sonia Green, his Jewish wife, noted Lovecraft's obsessive racism and tried to confront him about it. Lovecraft's time in New York City worsened these feelings. The multicultural crowds of Brooklyn reportedly sent him into fits of rage and panic. This prejudice is a dark stain on Lovecraft's legacy, forcing modern fans and writers to reckon with the man behind the mythos. It is a bitter irony that a creator so imaginative in envisioning external monsters was so unable to exercise the insidious prejudice within himself. Lovecraft's personal correspondence reveals a lonely, troubled soul, a man terrified of change, clinging to antiquated social views, and increasingly aware of his own failings. Physically and emotionally worn down, Lovecraft spent his final years back in Providence, living with his elderly aunt. He continued writing up until the end, although even his greatest stories brought him little income or recognition at the time. In 1936, he was diagnosed with intestinal cancer, the same year his last major tale, The Shadow Out of Time, saw print. Howard Phillips Lovecraft died on March 15, 1937, at the age of 46, after agonizing months of pain. At the time of his death, he considered himself a failure in every respect, an obscure pulp writer who had seen only rejection from mainstream publishers. He was buried in the Phillips family plot at Swan Point Cemetery in Providence. On his grave, carved beneath his name and dates, are the words, "I am Providence," a defiantly poetic epitaph Lovecraft once used to describe his deep bond with his hometown. Few mourners attended his funeral, and in the weeks after it seemed that Lovecraft and his bizarre imaginings might fade into obscurity, interred in the earth, just like him. But in truth, the end of Lovecraft's life was only the beginning of his immortal legend. Lovecraft's posthumous rise from obscurity is itself a story fit for one of his weird tales. In life, he was a fringe figure. In death, he became a titan of genre fiction. After 1937, a small group of his devoted friends and correspondents, notably August Derleth and Donald Wandre, endeavored to preserve and promote Lovecraft's work. They compiled his stories and lobbied for their publication in book form, leading to the founding of Arkham House Press in 1939, specifically to publish Lovecraft's writings. Slowly but surely, the wider world began to discover the cosmic nightmares Lovecraft had unleashed. By the 1960s and 70s, Lovecraft's stories were being recognized as classics of horror, earning a place in anthologies and inspiring a new generation of writers. The transformation was astonishing. When Lovecraft died, he was a little-known author, but within a few decades he was hailed as a master of horror, his influence permeating literature, art, film, and gaming. Today, the name Lovecraft has become synonymous with the whole realm of horror. The term Lovecraftian is part of the cultural lexicon, used to describe any story that evokes incomprehensible monsters and existential dread. His creations have taken on a life of their own. The octopoid deity, Cthulhu, for instance, has appeared in countless books, movies, video games, and even as plush toys and internet memes. Modern horror giants like Stephen King openly acknowledge Lovecraft's profound influence on their work, with King once calling Lovecraft the 20th century's greatest practitioner of the classic horror tale. Authors such as Clive Barker, Guillermo del Toro, and Neil Gaiman have also drawn inspiration from the Lovecraftian tradition of unknowable terrors. Even beyond direct adaptations, Lovecraft's ideas helped pave the way for the entire subgenre of cosmic horror and science fiction infused with dread. His fictional Necronomicon, a tome of forbidden knowledge, has become a pop culture icon, and the New England settings he made so ominous are now tourist attractions for devoted fans. Perhaps the most telling sign of Lovecraft's enduring legacy is the devotion he continues to inspire in readers and creators around the world. At Lovecraft's gravesite in Providence, admirers regularly leave tokens, pens, letters, figurines of Cthulhu, and coins emblazoned with the tentacled creatures, tributes to the dreamer who gave us a pantheon of nightmares. More than 8 decades after his death, his works remain in print and in progress, expanded by innumerable sequels, prequels, and spin-offs penned by others who tread the path he forged. Lovecraft has become a towering figure in horror literature, revered for his imagination, even as we acknowledge the blemishes of his personal views. His life, full of paradox and darkness, has in itself inspired biographies, films, and scholarly studies as if he were one of the enigmatic characters from his own stories. He has left an indelible mark on horror, the idea that perhaps the scariest thing is not the ghost in the closet or the killer around the corner, but the vast unknown above us and below us, the infinite night of cosmic mystery. In the end, Lovecraft's greatest contribution was the gift of fear. He once wrote, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." This simple truth underlies all of his fiction. By plumbing the depths of the unknown, Lovecraft forced us to confront the fragile limits of our sanity and the terrifying possibility that we are but tiny flickers in a boundless, uncaring universe. It is a fear that continues to captivate and chill audiences to this day. H.P. Lovecraft, the troubled genius from Providence, transformed his nightmares into everlasting art, and though he died believing himself a failure, the cosmic horrors he imagined now live on forever, casting a long, dark shadow over the world of horror, a shadow under which generations of readers still shudder, marvel, and dream.